Hey babe, welcome to my channel. My name is India. Today I want to dive into my 120-pound weight loss journey. And yes, I lost over 100 pounds completely naturally through diet and exercise. And I really feel like this is my debut on YouTube, so there's not a more appropriate video for me to make, because really what got me into content creation was sharing about my weight loss journey. So let's get into it. I feel like me sharing this too is like just me hopefully trying to give you some kind of insight into your own journey. And hopefully you can learn from my failures. You can learn from my mistakes. You can also feel less alone in the narratives that you hold about yourself, because I know so many of us struggle with the same self-deprecating narratives. And I feel like when you start to actually unlearn those narratives is when you actually see the most success on your weight loss journey. So again, I hope that you are inspired from this video. I hope that you learn what not to do. And I hope also it gives you some kind of blueprint and some kind of foundation going into 2026 so that it can be your most successful year. Now, before we dive into actionable steps, I feel like it's important for me to just to give you a quick overview of like early life and what actually got me to being 250 pounds. Because number one, unfortunately, I feel like it's going to be relatable for some of y'all, but also that's what actually created the foundation about my relationship with nutrition and my body and my mindset towards myself. And then I feel like also some of the shit I went through that ultimately feels like a negative experience also helped create so much resiliency in me, which helped me be successful on my weight loss journey. And kind of shifting that narrative and reclaiming it actually has supported me so much over the past 10 years on my journey. Now, I have been so open about my childhood and early life on social media, but if you want me to talk more in depth about it, just let me know in the comments, because girl, I've been in therapy for years. I've done a lot of healing. I feel really comfortable sharing about it. And honestly, I feel really empowered in doing so. And so just to give you a quick overview, and again, I don't want this to be a trauma dump session. I just want this to give perspective to what I was going through and what actually got me there. I grew up extremely poor. My mom had me when she was 17. I grew up in and out of the system. She struggled with addiction my entire life. And then when I was 15, I was actually emancipated on my own. And I would truly say that my weight loss journey started when I was 9 years old. I got my period when I was 9, and I feel like that's an incredibly young age to start puberty. And the reason I bring up poverty is because my access to food was a lot different than the other kids I was going to school with. And so already being like a more heavy set kid, like wearing a t-shirt to the pool and stuff, honestly was just exacerbated when I was 9, because it was like one day I got my period, the next day I got boobs, and my entire body was transforming. And I looked a lot different than the other kids. You know, my mom struggled with her own body image. She was bullied growing up. She struggled with her own insecurities. She had 4 kids from 17 to 21, and her body had just been through a lot. And so when I hit puberty, she projected those insecurities onto me. And because my body was shifting and I was starting to feel uncomfortable, like pulling my shirt and like just hiding my body, feeling uncomfortable, she thought that the best thing that she could do to protect me from being bullied and feeling uncomfortable was to help me lose weight. But the weight that I was gaining was puberty, right? Anyway, so she put me on diet pills right when I was like 9 years old. And I literally remember, like, I have 2 younger brothers who are just a couple years younger than me, them literally having like Hamburger Helper or Top Ramen for lunch, and my mom would literally hand me a shake, like a protein shake from Herbalife. And you know, I feel like that experience there, and I know my mom was trying to protect me from like being bullied and feeling insecure and like being the fat kid or whatever, but that experience there is really what started the narrative of food as the enemy. And from there on out, I honestly struggled with insecurities. I struggled with insecurities about my portion sizes. I struggled with insecurities about my body. I would eat in private. And throughout middle school and high school, food became a coping mechanism for me. I struggled with disordered eating. I would struggle with not eating enough and purging, but I also struggled so severely with binge eating, because it wasn't just that I was receiving pleasure or comfort from binge eating, but also the lack of money and the lack of access I had to food made me binge eat when I had food near me, because I felt like in my head I didn't know where my next meal was coming from. And that was really hard for me to unlearn once my life started to stabilize. Once I started to have more money and more consistent access to food, I still had those habits and I still had that mindset and I still had that identity that was attached to food, on top of all of the insecurities and narratives I had around food. So needless to say, by the time I was 250 pounds, my relationship with nutrition was extremely complicated and totally fucked up. And what really kickstarted my weight loss journey was one day I was actually getting ready for lunch with my family. And this story is crazy to me because I can remember it clear as day. Like, you hear of that, right? Like, people have these spiritual moments in their life. I can remember this. I can smell everything. Like, I can live this moment as if it happened yesterday. I was getting out of the shower and I was getting ready to go to a Mexican restaurant with my family, and I caught my reflection in the mirror. I was butt-ass naked and I looked at myself and I became actually disgusted with myself. I saw my reflection and I was like, how the fuck did you get here? First of all, nobody told me I was fat. That was literally the thought that came through my head. I was offended. I was like, how could nobody tell me that I was fat? And at that point too, I realized my life was completely out of control and the only person that was going to be able to change it was me. And it wasn't just my weight. When I caught my reflection there, I was in a very toxic relationship that I knew I needed to get out of. At that point, I didn't have the awareness to know that my weight loss journey was my exit plan, but I did know that I wasn't happy and I wasn't fulfilled and everything in my life was not sustainable at that point. And if there was any way that I was going to get control of my life, it was going to be through my weight. And I also had this narrative in my head that if anybody could do it, it could be me. And like I had been raised with like Weight Watchers and all these, you know, like Herbalife, like I mentioned, like all these other different fad diet programs. And like growing up all the way up until this point, I had already tried so many different things. I had already tried so many fad diets, detox cleanse, like you name it, I tried it. And so in that very moment, I decided that I was gonna be vegan. And honestly, it's because I had this narrative that vegans were super healthy. Now, if you know anything about veganism, is you can be a very unhealthy vegan. Like a lot of the times throughout my vegan journey, I was having French fries at restaurants because that was the only vegan thing on the menu. So being vegan, anything that's not sustainable, anything that's not balanced, unless your morals or whatever it is that aligns with you choosing that lifestyle, that's sustainable for you, amazing. For me, I chose veganism as a form of restriction. I thought in that moment, if I'm vegan, then I can't have anything that I want. And what I wanted was Reese's peanut butter cups and a fucking patty melt from Whataburger. And so I started to actually cut food like that out of my life. And so I went to lunch with my family that day, and normally I would always get a beef chimichanga smothered in queso, and I ordered beans and rice. And to be honest, like my education with nutrition was absolutely trash. Like I grew up on Hamburger Helper, Topper ramen, mac and cheese, like I said, like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Like I did not even know what protein was. I truthfully didn't even know what carbs and fats were. And I knew that calories were in food, but I had no idea how they were relevant to my journey or how they contributed to my weight. So that day I got beans and rice, and from there on out, I was like, I'm gonna be a vegan. And my family was like, yeah, right, okay. And I swear, babe, I dropped 20 pounds in the first 2 months. It was crazy. My confidence went through the roof. I was literally over the moon. I felt so good mentally and emotionally. Physically, I was ill. I was living off beans, rice, and peanut butter, and it was so fucked up and so disordered. And I do not recommend that at all, but I have to tell you this part of my journey because that foundation right there is what actually pivoted me to start educating myself about nutrition. And that's when I started learning about protein. That's when I started learning about fiber, B12, iron, like all of the things that vegans need to have a sustainable lifestyle. But even with that, and I'll get into it in a little bit, that all or nothing approach to nutrition, it wasn't sustainable for me. And eventually I lost 100 pounds within my first year, but I actually gained 80 of it back my second year. And then I lost 50 pounds my third year. So we're gonna kind of walk through it. But I did have a very disordered approach when I first started because I honestly had no idea what I was doing. And I feel like so many of us can relate to that. And like I said, the first year of my weight loss journey, I was in a really toxic relationship. I actually got to the point where I started dating this guy right when I was emancipated when I was 15. The relationship was fine in the beginning, and then it just progressively got worse. And it got to the point where he was fully providing for me when I was like 18 years old. And I felt like I didn't have any other way out because he wasn't allowing me to work. His insecurities were crazy. And he had also put on a substantial, like 200 pounds. He had put on a substantial amount of weight, and he was extremely insecure throughout our entire relationship. And when I started my weight loss journey, it honestly just exacerbated his own insecurities. And he would tell me things like, oh, you're losing weight for attention, or you're losing weight so that you can leave me, or all of these things. And when I started to lose weight, I actually started to build that confidence, right? I started wanting to pursue my dream of being a hairdresser. That was like my dream since I was in high school. And I wanted to go to beauty school, and I wanted to start working, and I wanted to take care of myself. And honestly, even when he was providing for me, there wasn't a day that I didn't want that for myself. But that's a whole different story of being in a toxic relationship. But it just got to the point where I was completely isolated and alone, and I started advocating for myself, and it took a lot of fight. But eventually, you know, he allowed me to get a waitressing job, and that gave me more access to education around food even there, and it gave me more access to confidence, and I started moving more. And honestly, that's the biggest thing, because when I started my weight loss journey, I was like 100% in on nutrition, and that's really where I was focusing. Which, if you're just starting your weight loss journey, you've been in this journey for a while and you're not seeing results, that's where you need to focus your efforts. I always say 100% of the journey is mindset, 80% of seeing your results is nutrition, which is why I lost 20 pounds my first 2 months, which is why I lost 100 pounds my first year, is because I was focusing on nutrition. But then when I started working, I started moving more. I was living such a sedentary life before. And so I actually started moving more. I started losing more weight, started building more confidence, and I just felt better about myself. And then long story short, we got into a huge argument, and I was like, I gotta get out of here. So I ended up leaving this guy, and I moved to Seattle from rural Texas, and I enrolled in beauty school. And that's honestly like the Reader's Digest version of it. But what happened when I moved to Seattle was I had so much access to healthy food. I had so much access to vegan food, and my entire world shifted. I was vegan for a couple of years during the beginning of my weight loss journey. And the reason why I don't advise like an all or nothing restrictive diet like veganism or being pescatarian or keto or whatever is because if it cuts out foods that you love and enjoy, then it's not sustainable for you. Again, if it's a moral thing, then that makes sense. But when I got to Seattle, I started going out with friends more. And like I said, I lived off like chips and salsa at Mexican restaurants and French fries. And I ended up gaining the weight back just because of my lifestyle, just because I was vegan and I wasn't eating meat or cheese or whatever whatever it was doesn't mean that I wasn't over consuming calories. And that's the biggest thing. Calories determine whether we gain, lose, or maintain weight. And so it wasn't until my friends and family actually told me that they were worried about like my cognitive like kind of presentation. They were like, you seem like a bit like lagged, like a bit like slowed down, like you're not as responsive. And so I went into a doctor's appointment and the doctors actually told me that I had like low B12 and low iron. And he actually encouraged me because it wasn't like a moral thing for me being vegan to start eating fish. And so that's when I started becoming pescatarian. And I honestly had such a disordered approach to nutrition because I was terrified of it because I didn't fully understand it at this point, that for years I had to have a label on the approach that I had to nutrition. Like I was vegan, I was pescatarian, I was gluten-free, dairy-free. And so that's a big thing because where I'm at right now, honestly, I'm in the healthiest mental and physical space I've ever been in my life, especially when it's relevant to this journey. But like I already told you, 80% of seeing your results is nutrition, 20% of it is fitness. And if you live a less sedentary lifestyle, you're gonna start to burn more calories, you're gonna start to lose fat more. But a lot of people don't realize this. I did not start my fitness journey until 3 years into my weight loss journey. By the time I stepped foot into the gym for the very first time, I was like 135 pounds. And I was so unhappy with the way I looked. And it's because I did have a lot of loose skin, to be honest. But also because I was like skinny fat. I had zero muscle, especially from being vegan all those years and not prioritizing protein. And then pescatarian. Also, I did not know the amount of protein I needed to eat. I didn't know about macros and how those were affecting my journey when I started at the gym. And it wasn't until I actually got into the gym that I actually started focusing more on macronutrients, because then I understood that nutrition was tied to the results I actually wanted to see. Like, you know that saying, abs aren't made in the gym, they're made in the kitchen? That's where I actually physically learned that, when I finally got in the gym and I was putting in this effort and I wasn't seeing the results that I wanted to see. I was also killing myself in cardio and HIIT and like doing all of those things, which I think is honestly really important when you start your journey to figure out what it is that you like. But when it comes to like a science-based approach to weight loss, the form of exercise that's going to get you the best results and the most sustainable results is weight training. Because weight training alongside a proper amount of calories and a protein goal that's going to help you build muscle is going to help you build muscle. And the reason why muscle is so important is because it's quite literally responsible for your metabolism. It's also going to give you that lean toned physique. And I feel like so many women are scared to eat protein and lift weights because they're scared to get bulky. But babe, let me tell you this. I have been lifting weights now for I guess like 6-7 years and I am not bulky. I've never once been bulky. The way that you get bulky is through a surplus in calories. That's why you hear kind of on social media when people say, oh, I'm going into a bulk, they're trying to build muscle. They're actually going to be putting on weight. You will not get bulky from lifting weights and eating protein. I promise you. Lifting weights and eating adequate amounts of protein, which is relatively like 1 gram of protein per your goal body weight, while also eating in a calorie maintenance or a slight calorie deficit, that is what's going to give you that lean, feminine tone physique that I know that you're already after. Also, protein and lifting heavy is what's going to give you a juicy booty. Oh my gosh. I don't know if you saw the post that I put up the other day on Instagram, but it was basically me being like, girl, this isn't luck, this is dedication. The way that my ass looks this year, which we will get into, is because of the amount of protein I have consistently ate and the amount of load that I have consistently put on my glutes. Now, getting back into my first day at the gym, for me, I felt so out of place, especially because of the energy that the men had in the weight room. And maybe that was my own internalization and projection and insecurity, but I already know as a coach, my clients are constantly telling me that they feel uncomfortable in the weight room. But I also want to say this to you. You belong there just as much as everybody else. Homeboy pays $29.99 a month and so do you. That is your real estate too, boo-boo. My first day up in LA Fitness, I literally walked in. I walked past the weight room because I was like, fuck that. That is so scary. I looked at the treadmills, but then I realized I had already passed the staircase and I was terrified to turn back around. So I just went straight into the locker room and then I sat in the sauna, and I did that every single day. I got into the habit of showing up at the gym every single day for a week. I literally would just go sit in the sauna for 20 minutes and then leave. And I was so embarrassed. Every time I walked into the gym, I was like, oh my God, I can't be here. I don't know. I just felt like I wanted to throw up every time I went in there. And then eventually, I don't know how many days it was, but eventually I got the courage to go upstairs to the treadmills. And then I figured out how to turn on a treadmill. Like, girl, I'd never been on a treadmill before. I literally figured out how to turn on a treadmill and go for a walk. And then I was like, oh my God, I need to run. Don't even get me started on cardio, okay? I am still not a cardio bunny and never will be. I do want to get into like more endurance training because I'm 31 and you know, the best way to train your heart is through endurance training, but I have never been a runner. I don't think I'll ever be a runner. And so that was awful and I hated it so much. And after I finally got into the gym, I went and had a consult with their personal trainers and I hired him and I wanted to work with him for a while because I knew that I needed the gym in order to reach my goals and I wanted to tone up and I wanted to feel comfortable in that environment. And so I put myself out there. I invested in myself and I learned so much from him. I learned so much from showing up at the gym and training with him. It got to the point where the first couple months I would show up and I'd work out with him, and then eventually me and my best friend would come to the gym and stuff like that, and I had no idea what I was doing, and I wasn't being consistent enough to see results fully. But what was important in that time for me is that I was getting comfortable being inside of the gym. And honestly, I didn't start falling in love with the gym until, truthfully, I had my heart broken in my early 20s. Me and this guy, obviously we broke up, and I felt so devastated, but he was like really into the gym. And anyways, regardless, as soon as we broke up, I fell in love with the gym. I really put all of my energy and efforts into there, and I was going to the gym, I was being consistent. Like, I was so freaking proud of myself, and I started seeing some crazy results. I started seeing glute growth. I started seeing endurance difference. Like, I was that girl. Like I said, I grew up overweight. What I didn't tell you is that, like, I literally never went to PE, boo. Like, my mom, she was so worried about me being embarrassed that she literally pulled me out of PE, which looking back is actually super relevant because it kind of taught me that exercise is embarrassing, and that's probably why I struggled with feeling embarrassed in the gym. But yeah, she pulled me out of PE and got me diagnosed with like this reoccurring patella dislocation. They said I had bad knees. Girl, I was just overweight and my knees hurt because as soon as I lost the weight, all of a sudden I didn't need the knee surgery that they were recommending. Actually crazy. I was literally in physical therapy for my knees at fucking 13 years old. Anyway, so I started surrounding myself by people who went to the gym and lived a healthy lifestyle, and that shit was bleeding on me, and I started doing it too, and it was so good. But when that heartbreak started to kick in, yes, I threw myself into the gym, and at this point what I was doing with nutrition is I was eating meat again. I had been pescatarian for a little bit, and then eventually started to incorporating chicken and things like that, and then keto came out. It was like keto was everywhere, girl. I was like, I'm gonna be keto too. This is amazing. I'm gonna live off bacon. Boom, my sweat smelled like bacon. It was actually disgusting. I lost 20 pounds on keto, and then the moment I stopped, I gained back 30 pounds. It was like this huge fluctuation. And when I went through this breakup, it's relevant for me to say that I kind of lost my shit. I had never really been anywhere in my life, right? Like, I moved around a lot. I went to 12 different schools growing up, but I had never really like gone anywhere. Do you know what I mean? And so when me and this guy broke up or whatever, I was like, I need to do something with my life. I was really struggling with depression, and where I was feeling so stuck. And my friend called me and she was like, do you want to go to the Philippines? And she only invited me on like a 10-day trip, and my ass was like, you know what? Fuck all this. Blew up my entire life, bought a one-way ticket to the Philippines, and decided that I was going to be traveling Asia by myself. I had never done anything that brave, that crazy ever in my entire life. And even she was like, are you sure? I was like, yeah, 100%. And so that happened in January, right? And I had already started building this healthy relationship with exercise. I had a healthy approach to nutrition-ish. Like, I was consistent. I was packing my lunches. I was living off literally canned tuna and stuff like that. Like, I was on a budget because I was a hairdresser at the time, which I'm sorry, I totally left out. Ended up going to beauty school after I left the first toxic boyfriend. You know, I was working around my schedule and I was making sure that I was consistent. But anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. Whenever I realized in January that I was going to Asia, I really locked in with my nutrition because I actually realized that when I'm in Asia, I'm probably not going to have as much access to like controlling my nutrition and working out and all the things. And I just wanted to look amazing while I was in the Philippines, because ultimately I probably just wanted to post like a thirst trap of me being in the Philippines looking hot as fuck for my ex-boyfriend to see, which is so stupid. Regardless, I really fucking locked in for 6 months. I locked in with my fitness, I locked in with my nutrition, and I locked in with my finances, and I saved up the most money I had ever had in my entire life, which was $10,000. And to me, I was fucking, that was rich. I was rich. I was leaving America. I was going to the Philippines, and then I got over there and I was just planning to live off that $10,000 until the money ran out. And my plan always was, no matter what, as soon as it hits $1,200, I'll go home. If I can't make any money here, I'll go home. $1,200 was like my ticket back, right? Long story short, I spent almost 2 years traveling through Southeast Asia, and it was honestly incredible. And it taught me a lot about nutrition. It taught me a lot about balance. And as I was traveling through Asia, I also tried different forms of exercise I had never explored before. Like, I was doing yoga and Muay Thai, and it was honestly a really incredible experience. And honestly, this is what I talk to my clients the most about. If you want sustainability on your weight loss journey, you have to work on shifting your identity. Your identity is who you identify with at your core. Like, if you think that you're somebody right now who struggles with their weight, if you identify as somebody who's fat, if you identify as somebody who's overweight, you will literally perpetuate that in your own life. And when I was in Asia, even though I didn't have structure, even though I wasn't constantly working out, when I had access to go to work out, I would go work out, because at that point in my life, for the very first time, I identified as somebody who worked out. I identified as somebody who ate lean protein. Like, I was prioritizing that while I was over there. I identified as somebody who drank water. Girl, I didn't drink water for like the first 20 years of my life. Shifting your identity and forcing yourself out of the identities that you currently have that are holding you back is honestly going to make the most impact in your weight loss journey. And the way that you do that is literally through repetition. You have to start showing up and following through with the promises you make to yourself. If you tell yourself that you're gonna get up tomorrow and you're gonna go to the gym and you don't, why would you believe yourself with anything else that you say? You have to follow through with the promises you make to yourself so that you can actually start to believe yourself when you tell yourself you're gonna do something. Like that day I told you on my weight loss journey. When I started my weight loss journey, I looked at myself and I said, you can do this. If anybody can, you can. And I don't know how that rewired my brain, but I truly believed that. And since then, I have been on my journey. Like I'm literally sitting here making y'all a YouTube video, like 120 pounds down, been sustaining the weight loss for several years now. And now I'm a full-time fitness, nutrition coach and content creator. Like honestly, I had no idea where my weight loss journey was going to bring me, but look at where it's brought me today. And that's the biggest thing. You have to release the outcome. You have to let go of where you want to be, because truthfully, you have no idea where you're going to end up, but you can have a goal. I want to lose weight. I want to be the healthiest version of myself, and then focus daily on the person that you need to start becoming in order to be the person that has those goals achieved. Okay, I'm done preaching now that I've gone into my coaching mode. And I would truthfully say 2020 was my massive pivot year. 2020 is the year that I literally stepped into it all. And I know 2020 is really hard. It's really hard to look back on for a lot of people. And for a lot of people, it was a devastating year. I mean, obviously we're in a pandemic and a lot of people leaned into unhealthy coping mechanisms. But I, at this point, had been living in Australia for a year and a bit. And right when I got back to the States, I was traveling through South Africa for 5 weeks and I landed in the States. And you know, my whole life at this point kind of revolved around alcohol. And honestly, I struggled so much with peer pressure. And even though I had quit smoking, I had really leaned into alcohol and food as a coping mechanism at this point. But I was still weighing in about like 150 pounds. I was super unhappy with how my physique looked and I was still trying to work out. But because I struggled with alcohol so much, like the hangovers and like the lifestyle that came with that would like hinder me from getting to the gym. Like I physically could not go to the gym. I was so hungover the next day or whatever. And then because I was so hungover, I would lean into foods that made me feel better, like burgers or whatever that is. And burgers aren't bad, but like, girl, if you're drinking a bottle of wine and then having a burger the next day, like that's not going to support you. And also, fun fact, your body cannot burn body fat 48 hours after consuming alcohol. And so when you drink, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't drink, and this is part of my journey, like I eventually quit alcohol. And like I told you at the beginning of this video, my parents struggled with addiction. I quit drinking for so many reasons. And I help a lot of my clients create balance around alcohol, but you need to know that when you drink, you physically cannot burn body fat for a while. And so even when you're drinking, I would say is the most important for you to be on point with your nutrition, which is sometimes counterintuitive, but it is important for you to know. And I feel like honestly, education is the most impactful element of my journey. And so the more you know, the better you can do. So anyways, back to the pandemic, back to 2020. This is really when things started to shift. After traveling through South Africa with my ex, we came back to the States and girl, we were so poor. I had $5,000 to my name. And at this point, she was on a tourist visa and she could not work. And obviously I couldn't work either. I had been working as a hairdresser in Australia the previous year, and that's all the money that I had. And so I actually started door dashing because there was no other jobs available at the time. And I now had 2 mouths to feed. I was waiting for salons to open up, so hopefully I could get some hairdressing work again. And then long story short, I'm sitting there one day going to buy a bottle of wine, knowing I only have less than $5,000 to my name, looking at this $20 bottle of wine. And I'm like, dude, I can't afford this. And I had already been feeling in Australia this kind of like urge to quit drinking. Like I would try and challenge myself. I don't want to drink tonight. I don't want to drink this weekend. Like I knew it was holding me back. I wanted to be healthy. I wanted to go to the gym, but I struggled so severely with peer pressure. And I can make an entirely different video about alcohol and how I quit drinking and why I quit drinking and all of the things. But ultimately in 2020, I saw my out. I was like, girl, quit drinking for a month. Just try it for a month. Nobody's here to peer pressure you. And I leaned fully into fitness. I saw my body transform that month. Like, I don't know if it was water weight, inflammation, whatever, but 1 month turned into 2 and 2 months turned into a year. And ultimately in that year, I had opened up my own little salon suite and things were going well. And I started posting on TikTok and I posted about my weight loss journey for the first time ever. And that shit blew up on TikTok. Okay. And girls were asking me in the comments, teach me, show me. And this entire time, like this entire story I've just told you, my entire weight loss journey, I had always wanted to lean into personal training and nutrition. I had always wanted to be a part of that space. And ultimately at this point, I'd been hairdressing for like 8 years and I was exhausted by the industry. Physically, like it was really hard on me. Mentally, it was really hard on me. And I wanted to get out of it. But I had this imposter syndrome of being like a personal trainer, nutritionist, because unfortunately I did have loose skin, and that mentality in my head, because my body wasn't like everyone else's or whatever, I felt like nobody would ever want to work with me because I didn't look like a personal trainer, whatever the fuck that means. I obviously have struggled really deeply with insecurity and limiting beliefs and narratives that weren't supporting me. And this is another thing that I had to get through. And so anyways, after blowing blowing up on TikTok. I actually had this one video go viral and I was on the news and Yahoo and all of the things. I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna become a personal trainer. And so I was managing my own little salon suite, managing my own independent clients, and then I went and got my certification for nutrition, for personal training. And after I got my personal training certification in 2021, I started to pull back from hairdressing and lean into content creation, lean into coaching. And I launched my coaching business in 2023, January 2023. And honestly, that changed the game for me. And it wasn't because coaching or whatever helped me on my weight loss journey, but it was because it helped me reinforce this idea that I am a healthy person. I do live a healthy lifestyle and I am the example. And what I actually had been through was amazing. Losing over 100 pounds naturally, like it gave me the validation that I needed. It just made sense to be able to reach and help so many people from all over the world. And I was working with people in the UK and Israel, and still to this day I have girls in Australia and all the things. And so it's just really fucking cool. Like I had no idea again that my weight loss journey was going to bring me where I am today. And if you've been following me this year, then you already know I've been through a lot of shit this year and I've traveled a lot this year. I literally moved from Austin to Hawaii. It has been an up and down crazy roller coaster year, but the two things that have been consistent no matter what have been my nutrition and have been my fitness. And the way that I feel like I've created so much sustainability in my life, again, number one is shifting my identity, reinforcing my identity, really focusing on who I am and who I want to become, and always showing up as her. And ultimately education. Like at this point in my journey, I already know so much about nutrition that I'm able to be consistent because I fully understand how macros and calories affect my journey. And that's why that is one of the number one things that I focus on with my clients, mindset and education, because no matter who enters my program or how long they stay for, like I have girls that have been with me for years because they love the structure, they love the accountability, but I want to make sure that everybody who does enter my program ultimately feels confident enough and feels empowered enough to continue on this journey for the rest of their life. Because like it or not, it is a lifelong journey. It is a lifestyle and you have to be able to lean into that. And the way that you do that is reinforcing that narrative, reinforcing that identity. So ultimately, you're somebody who follows through with the promises that you make to yourself. And like I said, I feel like 2025 was my least restrictive, my most balanced, my strongest, my healthiest year yet. And so coming into 2026, I'm going to take everything that I learned in 2025 and I'm going to lean even further into discipline. You've ever heard that like kind of saying 1% better, girl? I am literally forcing myself to be 1% better all year next year. And it's not just about me having the most lean or most toned physique. Honestly, now that I'm 31, I'm going to be 32 next year. And if you've been following me, you know my grandpa's been struggling with health problems. For me, it's about longevity at this point. Like I want strong, healthy knees. I want endurance. I want to dance. I want to surf. I want to lean in, like I said, to like some kind of hybrid endurance training. But what I'm going to continue to focus on, and I feel like I didn't even have time to talk about this, and it could be an entirely different video, is my why. And your why is the most relevant part of your journey. And sometimes you'll have this overarching why, like this big, huge core why, and maybe that will stay very relevant in your life. Like maybe one of my biggest core whys is I want to prove to myself, actually, that I want to show myself what it looks like when I don't give up. Like I literally want to look back on my life and be like, damn girl, you fucking did that. You never gave up, because truly you only fail if you quit. And so actually I'm never failing as long as I'm always learning and I'm never giving up, right? And so I feel like anyways, that's a big why of mine. But maybe a smaller why is like I have a photo shoot in a couple months, or I have a vacation this summer. But whatever your why is, it has to be so compelling. And I tell my clients this when we go through exercises about this, is that your why has to be just as compelling as your rant. Like I always use the analogy, if you've ever fucking hated your job and you still show up to that job even though you fucking hate it, like my door dashing job, absolutely hated it. Why did I show up? Because I needed food. And if I didn't have food, I was gonna die. I needed to pay my rent. If I didn't have shelter, I was gonna die. Whatever. That is a really strong fucking why. And your why today on your weight loss journey, no matter where you're at, has to be that compelling. Otherwise, on the days that you're laying on the couch and you don't feel like it, you're not gonna follow through, because not feeling like it is not compelling. And also your why isn't strong enough that it's actually gonna get you up off the couch. Your why has to be so compelling that on the days that you don't feel like it, it forces you to get up and follow through. And so my why today is still what's keeping me going. My why that I formed 10 years ago in that bathroom butt ass naked, and the why that I formed today even filming this YouTube video, that's what's keeping me disciplined, and that's what's keeping me consistent. And consistency is how you get results. Motivation is fleeting, and I know that we're coming into the new year and you might feel motivated and you might feel inspired, and when you have those glimmers of motivation and inspiration, you have to lean into them, because again, they're fleeting. And hopefully during those really highly motivated seasons, you're able to create the habits and routines that you need to be successful on your weight loss journey, that you need to be successful to be consistent long term. Then when motivation leaves, you have to lean into discipline, and discipline is connected to your why. Anyways, that was a very long story long about my weight loss loss journey. I feel like I covered a lot, but there's still so much to talk about, and I feel like I brought up a million different subjects. So if you want clarity, if you want me to go in depth on anything else, you have questions, please just let me know in the comments. Honestly, my YouTube journey is probably gonna be a lot like my weight loss journey. Like, I'm gonna feel embarrassed, I'm gonna feel awkward, I'm gonna feel like I don't know what I'm doing. Again, I'm gonna stay connected to my why, even if I'm embarrassed, even if I'm scared, and especially if it's imperfect. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for being here. I'll see you next week.